the language of our people, g'day. Now, assuming you're all in the right place and not just really early for Karthik's talk, I'd say that most of you are expecting to hear about inclusion. Now, you're mostly right, but the title of this talk is Practical Inclusion. So we're going to be talking about the hard work side of this idea, and more importantly, how it can make a team powerful. Now, we do know that Australia is on a completely different planet to the USA, so you might find some of this a touch unusual, but hopefully in a way that kickstarts some ideas that you can take home. So I'm one of the lead mentors of 5985. My name's Andrew. This is Faith, our awards mentor, Zanita, our awards lead, and Will and April, some of our impact presenters. We come from a place called Wollongong, about 2 hours south of Sydney. It's a regional centre. The two biggest things we have going for us is the steelworks and the university. So that's where we come from. So take it away.
Our mission is create opportunity, transform the community. In our experience, practical inclusion starts with recognising need and simply creating opportunities, which can take you to some very unexpected places. So we're going to tell you a two-part story. For the first part, we're going to talk about opportunities 5985 have created, and then for the second, we're going to talk about how those opportunities have come back to shape our team. For this first chapter, I want each of you to take notes of each type of inclusion that you recognise in the activities we mentioned.
5985 is an independent community team. This means we have to fund ourselves, relying on our student contributions, fundraising and grants to operate. We currently have 44 students from 20 high schools, including homeschoolers, and we're open to anyone from year 7 to 12 who can pass our safety and cultural requirements.
So like many FRC teams, we have a Lego Robotics program, only ours is just a little more involved than others. Our speciality is RoboClub, weekly 2-hour after-school classes. We run an average of 2 separate classes each day of the school week, with 10 to 20 students in each class. And we run them in locations all over the south coast of New South Wales, from Sydney to the cities of Wollongong and Shellharbour, down to Nowra, which is a rural area. We do a lot of travelling each week. We also do multi-day robo-camps 4 times a year during our school holidays. So this is what we call our teaching program, and it funds 5985.
So we take ages 7 and up and see up to 250 kids each week. Some have been with us for 9 years. We do fun classes. So that's Plants vs. Zombies played with robots. We're able to operate our teaching program because over 99% of our students since 2015 volunteer as mentors at these classes. Running the teaching program provides over 80% of funds used by 5985. So this is not a little thing, and we've gotten pretty good at it, and it has led to some interesting applications.
So at the beginning, we estimated over 40% of students attending our mainstream classes were neurodivergent or had some other disability. Now in Australia, we have something called the NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's basically a government insurance policy that any Australian can access if they have a disability. So it can pay for things like therapy, installation of ramps, mobility equipment, and things like that. So what happened? NDIS students started being able to access our classes as therapy, not for the tech skills, but for what else was involved. Coping with failure, fine motor skills, emotional regulation, following instructions, working with others. The list goes on quite considerably. We were the fun way to do those activities.
Our classes were also unsurprisingly male-dominated. So with the help of some government grants and then sponsors, we have been able to run our Rocket Girls into Robotics class, which is a free all-girls RoboClub program run by the female mentors and students of 5985. We worked with refugee and Indigenous groups to spread interest for this program. And it turns out that after-school classes are perfect greenhouses for FLL teams. Every year, every one of our classes will produce at least one team, sometimes more. using class time to prepare for competition. With this many teams in Wollongong, it meant we could host our own FLL regional. We ran it for 11 years, and it's the only regional in our state outside of south of Sydney.
And then things got bigger again. Our connection with Scouts turned into our first Scouts program, where we integrated FLL and STEM into the Scouts Australia program. We then got funding to run Unlimited, a program designed to target those normally overlooked by STEM opportunities. We were funded to run RoboClub programs during school hours at special education units in schools. We spent 10 weeks at a time in each location, cycling through schools throughout the region over several years. Now, there were two common factors each time. The teachers were constantly blown away by the engagement we got from these students, and there were no programs offering this kind of experience for them.
At the same time, we started running a similar program for disability support providers. The class is being used as vocational training for students aged 18 to 65. As you can see, age makes no difference in enthusiasm or being able to learn. I should point out that the Homeschool 5985 students were vital parts of running these programs, as their timetable can be flexible.
Next, SALCO, or the Spanish and Latin American Community Organization. They engaged us to run a free RoboClub for children from culturally and linguistically diverse families. The interest of this class led to the creation of an FRC team.
And then we got the funding for Unstoppable, a program that uses STEM and FIRST as an early intervention program to divert youth from criminal or antisocial behaviour. We spent a lot of time with students from Langtree, a behavioural school where students come from backgrounds of trauma, abuse, neglect or addiction. Most already have involvement with the justice system. We had to develop a new way of doing FIRST to reach these students, but it paid off with the creation of an FRC and FLL program.
So things just got a little bit bigger, in case you hadn't noticed. So we recently got a 3-year report from Qualifier. So it covered the many positive effects, but there were two that stood out. The first one is these tough, cynical, jaded kids trust our kids. Secondly, not one of those FRC students reoffended in 3 years. Now that's huge. Now I'll point out that that's nothing. Their biggest impact from doing their first regional as an FRC team, it wasn't nothing to do with the robots. It was the welcome and acceptance found by every other team there. To these kids, adults are the enemy and peers cannot be trusted. That first regional totally upended that world. So Unstoppable also covered more classes for the disability service providers, this time as life skills activities for youth and young adults, and created an FTC team at another behavioural school, and yet another FRC team in a low SES mainstream school. So it can be repeated.
And then we discovered Unified Robotics. Unified teams combine players with and without intellectual and developmental disabilities. Participants build and program Lego robots for an exciting competition. Beyond STEM, it breaks down barriers, building collaboration, creativity, and compassion. The vast majority of Unified Robotics programs are actually run by FIRST teams. This was the perfect fit for our Unlimited and Unstoppable students, and we worked with Special Olympics to introduce the program to Australia, and became the Global Game Design Committee. It turns out all those years of developing Lego robotics games meant we had a lot to offer in ways of exciting challenges.
Now, as an aside, this program is easy to implement and incredibly powerful, and it runs in the FRC off-season. So, in our classrooms, it has overcome disability as a barrier to communication between students. I strongly urge you to check it out. If you want to, have a chat to the other Andrew up the back there. If you want to find out more, he's one of the founders of Unified Robotics.
Then we got ambitious. We got some grants to fund 3 FTC teams, and we used them in special education units in 3 high schools. We ran them under the Unified model, inviting mainstream students to become partners. It was a powerful program, it's been a powerful program just for robot learning, and got to another level entirely once it hit the qualifier. And that was the Wollongong FTC qualifier, the only event outside Sydney in our state, and this year the only Australian event held on a weekday, which means schools can transport their students to the event without needing outside support.
Now, this isn't everything. We're active in nursing homes, preschools, pop culture events, scientific displays. We're called into run gifted and talented programs in Sydney and a hands-on robotics store at the Sussex and Viking Festival. To our surprise, robots and Vikings can't miss. So all of these programs grew from our teaching program, and most of this growth came from recognising opportunities from existing programs and then having the enthusiasm to proceed.
So in everything we've just mentioned, and yes, I'm aware it's a bit of a fire hose, 5985 team members have been the ones proposing and running these activities. And they're the ones engaging with students of all ages. So what inclusion types do you think we covered in that rush of information? Anyone got any ideas?
And then what program do you guys think had the most impact? So we're going to do a short little Q&A break and then we're going to get into the second part.
You're at the front, you're a victim.
I have a question.
Nope.
My first question is how many students?
44 kids from 20 schools. Everyone was kind of shell-shocked. Alrighty, okay. So then we'll move on to chapter 2. So you can ask more questions about how we do things later, like we encourage you to do so. So that was all about what we do. This is going to be about how that outreach that we created turned around and shaped 5985. So the challenge at this point, for those of you taking notes, which of these things, or these approaches, do you think you can implement in your team? So, number 1, the work hard for the money thing. Go for it.
Simplest one first. Earlier we mentioned that 5985 depends on student contributions and that 91% of the team members volunteer as mentors in our teaching program. There's a reason for that stat. Team members can volunteer in lieu of team fees. Give 2 hours a week at a Robo Club and 2 days each holidays at a Robo Camp, and it costs you nothing to do FRC with 5985, except for the international competitions. This has a direct impact on our makeup. 30% come from low income backgrounds. Without this policy, they couldn't participate. This policy enables entire families to take part without paying huge amounts. Curiously, even families that could afford the team fees choose the volunteer option. It's a powerful thing to put on a resume that you have been responsible for teaching children robotics for 3+ years.
So this leads us to the cycle.
So what do you think happens when a teaching program student spends several years, sometimes from ages 7 to 12, being taught STEM, encouraged and challenged by kids in 5985 uniforms, hearing about how the team is going, celebrating success, and when they do FLL, being mentored by these same people that are then referees, volunteers, and judges at events? What do you think happens? Over 85% of all 5985 members ever have come from the teaching program. Students join the team and stand alongside their former mentors as equals, and then start mentoring themselves. There are powerful bonds formed during this process. Think about what it would do to your confidence and enthusiasm to be part of a team that already knows you before you join it.
And this is my favourite one, the weird ones. So the incredible reach of the teaching program alone, before you add all the other parts, shapes the makeup of 5985. The running gag is we attract the weird ones, and that's the way we like it. The reason why 5985 students are so committed to programs that reach the underserved, the overlooked, that's where they all come from. Over 70% of 5985 have a disability or a disorder. In 5985, you find the misfits, the bullied, the isolated, the lonely, the disadvantaged, and the fearful. This is the place where they are safe and happy.
One benefit of removing barriers to participation is that anyone can participate. As such, truly reflects the diversity of the community around it. We have a mix of public, private, selective, special education, and homeschooled students. Students from higher-fee private grammar schools working alongside those from some of the lowest socioeconomic schools in the state. 52% of our team are female, holding over half the leadership positions. Our team are immigrants, refugees, born in and outside of Australia, representing nationalities, cultures, religions, and backgrounds of so many varieties. You should see our team dinners. We also have a wide range of sexuality and gender, based on the principle that the entire team knows that each student can tell us about it if and when they're ready. The lesson, being inclusive, can start by just being ready to meet kids where they are.
Right. Could I see a show of hands here? Who's had a team do the we're a family approach? Yeah? So, we're not. I know it works for other teams, but for this motley crew, it's not realistic. So, we have a different rule. The first rule, students of 5985 here, is you don't have to like each other. You do have to respect each other. Without doubt, be kind. The second rule. Following rule 1 is more important than any robot win or awards result. We would rather tank the entire season than lose that attitude. So we don't teach what respect means. It occupies a significant part of our pre-season training, leadership training, and intake training. We give practical lessons in how to apply respect in discussions about design, prototypes, and debates. Everyone gets a voice, and, most importantly, is allowed to disagree. We include how to respect the team, your teammates, the use of your time, and materials. So, echoing the question we asked before, what do you think happens when you're in a group of people who practice that kind of respect? We had a new team member who had ASD level 2 and was bullied very badly at school. She had a school assignment where she had to write about something she loved doing. She chose first, of course, and her mother came and showed us the part where she explained why. This young lady wrote, I have no friends at school. I started robotics, and now I have 41 friends. There were 42 members of the team that year.
This leads into the freedom to laugh. Another student on our team has an uncontrollable laugh her family has dubbed the dumb seagull. It's loud, unusual, and truly out of control when she is happy and finds something truly funny. She learned pretty quickly not to laugh at school. That's changed. In the workshop, that laugh now rings out regularly, with team members joining in by asking, who broke her this time? And judging the humour of the situation by how long it takes to stop. There are at least 5 other students who are set off, all with the same type of laugh, and now have the freedom to be joyful without fear.
In our workshop, we have a quiet room and provide a supply of fidget toys and exercise balls to serve as seats. Our 3D printer experts delight in making new and custom fidgets for use. Our safety training includes recognizing panic attacks, anxiety, and recognizing ASD self-management techniques. When we do safety talks, we include the line, no one would expect you to walk into the workshop on a broken ankle. It's the same way if we wouldn't expect you to walk in amidst anxiety or panic.
We recognise sensory issues. Many of our students need to wear noise-cancelling headphones at all times, or need the use of sensory devices like tablets to function. They can't handle the noise of a vacuum cleaner when it comes to cleaning, but are quite willing to scrub the toilets. We support that choice. Project Persephon's members wear hidden disability lanyards at events and have implemented their use at first events across the board, as well as bringing vital quiet rooms and sensory equipment to quiet rooms.
Now, just to be clear, this didn't happen all at once, nor was it always deliberate, and nor were we always perfect. We made plenty of mistakes. However, we looked for needs, did our best to fill them, and the bottom line, just choose to be kind. Now, I've been told by people smarter than me that those last 2 points implement something called psychological safety, the freedom to speak up, feel, and do so without fear. Which then brings us to the next one, redefining leadership. When over 70% of your team has a disability, you are eventually going to have issues when it comes to leadership and veterans. Sometimes barriers can be overcome, but there are also conditions that mean it is not possible for a team member to fill a traditional leadership role. PTSD, anxiety, autism spectrum disorder, these are just some of the conditions that could apply here. So, we just upended the leadership and changed the roles. Now, 88% of our leadership positions are occupied by members with a disability. Note that, 88%. How the heck did we do that?
One of our sub-team leaders has diagnosed anxiety. In the workshop, she's safe and able to function with a bit of support. She cannot fill that role at a regional, and we don't expect her to. Her sub-team backfills for her as needed. Another team leader has been diagnosed with ASD level 2. Her ability to read and handle complex social situations is practically zero, but she follows rules to the letter, and her attention to detail is incredible. Not to mention her enthusiasm is through the roof, and her technical skills. She cannot fill a traditional FRC leadership role, and cannot handle the noise and stress of pit and competition. But she excels running a small manufacturing team of 6 members who are all task-focused, enjoy the simplicity and directness of her communication, and who all understand her abilities. Incredibly, she was a Dean's List finalist, and with new support strategies and the help of her team, she's in our pit right now. Another ASD Level 2 anxiety student is in awards and programming. She will never be able to speak to judges in the pit or the presentation room. She could never lead teammates in a task, and the sensory overload at events is tremendous. She has discovered she enjoys and excels at teaching children, and does way more than one single teaching program class each week.
So remember the NDIS kids, the kids with disabilities attending her classes. What do you think it means to them when someone like them with noise-cancelling headphones and sensory or support devices is the one being their teacher? Incidentally, that last student we mentioned was also named a Dean's List finalist. 5985 still has traditional leadership roles. We just don't eliminate a contender because they can't do all of the job. We don't stop with what you can't do. We look for what you can do and work around it. That's what being inclusive from the top down actually looks like.
So I'm still seeing a few of those shell-shocked faces. We got more. Then we get to the guide dogs. So we need to be aware that we're not going to be ready for everything. We had a teaching program student that had a bundle of conditions that included ASD and being legally blind. He could see blurs and needed a magnifier to see screens or anything that wasn't directly in front of him. For 4 years, he attended our classes and every single RoboCamp. This was his very, very, very happy place. He stated his overwhelming desire to do FRC one day and kept checking how old he needed to be to actually pull it off. So he started this from about age 7 or 8.
In 5985, we make sure that everyone gets a shot. So we brought in Guide Dogs Australia, who assessed our workshop. While our workshop was physically accessible, it did not take long to figure out it was not visually accessible. Under their direction, we marked out lines and bumps in bright tape, made sure to remove any overhangs in the storage room, and made other changes.
So he turned out to be excellent at close-in work, but had to get way too close to safely be able to do any machining or electrical. He's currently taking on programming, which we found is an excellent fit. He does need a support worker, part of which is paid for by his NDIS funding during build season. He wasn't there every day, but he did contribute and had a blast. He even has code on our competition robot.
There were reservations about his ability to navigate a regional, both in and outside the team, but with his cane and between his team, First Australia, a bunch of understanding volunteers, and just about every other team, he had an absolute blast, dancing and cheering with his team.
You've heard a bunch of stories and strategies of how Project Persepolis does things. Hopefully some of these can spark discussions or implementation in your own teams.
We encourage you all to look at what can be done rather than what can't, and create opportunities, because you never know where they'll take you.
So this is the time we put aside for questions, because something this complicated usually can't be dealt with us talking a lot at you. So we encourage you all now, if you've got questions or want clarification, please do so. So otherwise, thanks for listening.
So, I know you mentioned that some of your students and some people in leadership positions have different challenges when it comes to being in the pits or certain situations during competition. How do you accommodate their needs for that and make them feel help them to complete their roles to the best of their ability, and how do you help everyone through that?
I'll do the first one, and if you guys want to add the next, you can. So the young man that was legally blind, I mentioned, there's not a lot for a programmer to do at a competition, so he's doing scouting. So what we've got, the volunteers gave him permission to sit by field side with one of our team members. He was manning a scouting tablet while his companion was calling out what the robots were doing, which is a normal procedure, just a lot further back. And he was contributing to the scouting pretty much the entire event, like most of them, probably about 2/3 of our team are scouting.
So another example is the young girl we mentioned who has ASD and whose support is now in PITS. One of the strategies that we only found out this year worked really well for her is setting a timer. So she'd spend a timer length in the pit, and then she would have a timer to go have a break and come back. So by doing that, she only had in the pits for short bursts at a time, and she found she was able to handle it a lot better.
And that's also why we brought quiet rooms to competitions, so that our team members or anybody else at competitions who needed them could go to the quiet rooms to self-regulate. As well, to help also is the hidden disability lanyards, which help people around the competition understand, just by looking at them, that they may have a hidden disability, so some of their behaviours may not be able to kind of be explained verbally. It just allows other people at competitions to see them and, just know that they have a disability, and to just, be wary of them.
So the hidden disability lanyards are now an official part of First Australia judge training, and we're trying to expand it outwards.
How did you guys find your build space, and how does it work having students from over 20 schools?
Okay. Want me to deal with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably for the first 5 years of the team's existence, we worked out of K-6 schools, so what we call primary schools in Australia. We said, let us honour your school, we'll give you a free robotics program, FLL, and you give us the basement room or something. So I think we moved between 3 or 4 locations in 5 years for that one. And then TAFE, who was the logo on our shirts, I guess the closest equivalent we have to you guys have is a community college, training school, trade school. Technical and further education, so it's a bridging school for alternate education, trades, pathways to university, things like that. They came and said, we want the same deal but bigger. So we got given an old student union function room, so where they used to do weddings and things like that. It had been empty for 3 years, so we came in, cleaned it, and started using it. And as a result, we now have the only programming team in the world that works out of the bar.
We also have the only full field in our state outside of Sydney, which has been a lifesaver for several rural teams. And we also share our workspace with 3 other FRC teams. 16 other first teams. Most of them are FLL, but a
basically we work on barter. So we've been able to swap what we were able to do in exchange for stuff that the school wasn't using anyway, which has been a pretty good system for us.
So I believe the second part was the 20 different public schools. So like we said, with us being open means that we can reflect the community on it. So the majority of these kids come through the teaching program. And because we're active in so many locations and so many different schools, we tend to get a lot of different students seeing what the team is and coming into it.
I think the longest commute we had was Sussex Inlet, which is what, 2-hour drive?
2 hour one way.
Yeah. So we have kids coming in from all over. In fact, we actually got a team member from Iowa for a while. There was no teams nearby where she was, so we started doing remote team management about 2 years before COVID hit. So we already knew what to do when it happened. And we've got Brazil as well.
Did I answer your question?
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of different programs that you have to help with this diversity inclusion. But how do you manage lab hours as well as that? Because that seems like a lot. Like, what is your schedule like?
Sorry, lab hours?
I'm saying working on the robot.
Fortunately for us, the start of FRC is in our school holidays. So that's when our teaching program is like not in full swing. So we'll come in from 10 till 9 throughout all of the holidays. We do all of that work, and then when school starts, we go after school until the end. And if you do a teaching program class, you start whenever that finishes, you come in and you do classes there.
Or if you do a teaching program class, you're not expected to come into the workshop after doing it. Another thing we tell students is their first priority should be school or family. So, for example, we have some students on our team who are doing the HSC or Year 12 final year of study, which takes up a lot of time, so they get reduced hours for the teaching program. So they don't have to do the weekly classes, they not only have to do one holiday classroom, and we're not expecting them to come in a bunch.
Does that answer your question? Over there. Yeah.
So, like, what you guys were saying about the quiet room, and I know that, like, kind of relating those two, do you have something like that in the pits? Because the pits can get really crowded and almost everyone I know is, like, overwhelmed. And how do you manage your people in the pits? How do you do that?
Okay,
So there's a couple of ways. First off is basically a time limit. So if you are going to be overwhelmed, out you go for an quiet room, stay there for an amount of time, then come back. The second is, I think in every pit we've had so far, probably the last 3 or 4 seasons, there has been a space carved out amidst the bags that's a small cave under a desk somewhere that someone can go crawl into and hide if they need to. We also have enough of team structure that if person A is overwhelmed and needs to leave, person B is called to take the spot.
We make sure that there is something that people can sit on in the pits, because again, we have a lot of people who also have mobility issues and stuff. It's a bit harder to do in the US when we can't transport as much stuff, so we make sure that the boxes in our pit can support people's weight and stuff like that.
How did you go about developing the curriculums for the different teaching things, as well as what advice would you give to a team that wants to start a similar program?
So I missed that.
So how do we develop lessons and what does this?
So I'm a board games geek. So I'll give you a hint. We have a game called Battleship. We teach projectile motion. So we put out paper cutouts of boats with loaded mousetraps on them. The students have to build a robot that can shoot a ball and they sink a ship when they set off a mousetrap. We saw Plants vs. Zombies. We also have, anyone here a history buff? Ever heard of the Royal Game of Ur? It's one of the oldest board games known to exist. We turned it into a robot-like game. Stratego, got a version for that. We've got races, we've got archery, we've got Olympics. Basically, if you can think of a theme, somebody can think of a way to make it happen. So we have a pirate game we used for Unified Robotics 2 years ago. Line following. They're following an ocean. Another ocean on the other side. They've got an ultrasonic sensor facing out, and they have a ball launcher as a cannon. Their job in the game is to score as many laps as possible and score hits on the other pirate ship as it goes around. The sailor is the target.
On the more practical side of developing them, a lot of our team members, because they teach in the Lego Robotics classes, are very knowledgeable in that stuff, and if they have an idea, they'll propose the basic, this is what I wanted to do, this is how we think coding should work, and then they build a prototype robot and prototype code, and that goes through several phases of development and testing, and then we create our own instructions using, I believe it's Lego Studio, as a Lego CAD program.
Yeah, so if you want to start something, I would suggest starting off by invoking the old FRC adage, steal from the best, invent the rest. Just Google Lego Robotics activities. Dr. Graham and Lego Engineering and a few places like that have some classics like Crossing the Gap and Simple Tasks, and then find something that you or your kids are excited about and make a robot version.
So Lego Education has a bunch of resources and instructions that you can make from the kit, and that the kids can guide themselves through the lesson with minimal support.
One thing I will add, did anyone here know what a Tamagotchi is? Hand up, come on, let's show how old you are. There we go. So, we do a unit called Alive, where we sort of introduce the concept of artificial intelligence, and we program a Lego robot to act like that. It gets hungry, tired, sick, throws a tantrum and dies if it's left alone. Basically, we're teaching 7-year-olds how to program the state machines. So the other part there is get ambitious. Kids can learn an awful lot of things. We've had a couple of kids that did that class, then come to a programming session run by Citrus, and the kid looked at me and said, I know what he's talking about, with complete mystification. He didn't realise what he knew.
When it comes to students being able to recognize their needs and advocate for them, do you guys have to do work to help students along that process? And then what does it look like between like a student that has a particular need and then developing like a solution for them, like a system or a structure?
So we'll see if Sydney, do you want to have that a shot at that one or not? Okay, good.
So I have a couple sisters on the team, so they all have special needs. So my two older sisters both have disabilities, and so for them, they're not necessarily good at first identifying what the problem is, but once they help, so as mentors on the team have helped them identify the problem, and then for them it was more of a trial and error to find a proper solution. But once they found it, they were able to say, yes, this works, continue, and for everything that didn't work, they said, no, that's not working, we need to find something else. And we have our executive committee, which is our student leaders, that some of the younger students that may not be comfortable talking to the mentors can go through the executive committee that goes directly to the mentors.
Topping off on that, we have a group in Australia called Headspace, which is about youth mental health. We get a visit from them at least in build season and maybe a couple of times. So our EC leaders are trained in how to recognise mental health issues, and we have a couple of mentors on the team that are very experienced with kids and the mental health issues they can suffer because they're their parents. So it all adds up. Does that answer your question?
Hi, this is more of a smaller question, but I wanted to know some suggestions for teams to find and connect with different government programs.
You want Australian programs or US programs? I can tell you a lot about
Either.
not a lot. So I must admit to not being too familiar with how your political system works. But in Australia, we have local, state and federal government members. So we make a point of engaging with each of those, getting goodwill, and then keeping an eye out for grants, because a lot of the grants will only, a decent chunk of the grants require support from a local government member to validate that you're not just a bunch of cowboys off saying give us lots of money. So starting with connecting with your members, the other would be connecting with community groups that work in your area. So I think, do we have Flagstaff up on this somewhere?
Yeah, so like disability service providers like Flagstaff or Southco, the Spanish American community organisation, they also have members who are part of the government. So the biggest thing to do is make friends first and don't ask for anything of them straight away. At least that in Australia, that's how it works. I'm not sure about how your government system works.
Hopefully you guys can answer this, or if you can, it's okay. So have you guys gone the other way, kind of with individual disabilities? Have you had any experiences of accommodating mentors with disabilities that kind of show? Because I have this plan I have with my institution of we have this. Anyway, individuals with disabilities, I'm trying to integrate them as mentors onto my team. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that.
67% of our mentors are women. So, yes, quite a lot. Yeah, so it is a little bit more complicated because you have duty of care alongside accommodating needs. So when you're a mentor, duty of care always comes first. So somebody that was suffering from lack of emotional regulation would need very, very different roles to somebody that just wasn't too much. Yeah. So it's a yes, but whatever you do, you've got to keep that balance. Duty of care always comes first, and anything you do under that, you'll find that a lot of things you do for the kids also work for the adults. Is that?
With the Unstoppable program, how are you reaching out to those people that have had experience with the law or like those underserved individuals? Like, are you just posting online on social media, or especially with you like not being associated with the school, how are you reaching out to them?
So in Australia, we have the Vocational Skills Network, which is a special education teaching conference that we commonly demonstrate, go to demonstrate, show them what we're doing. And we had the Flame Tree teachers come up to us and ask us if we could do anything for their students, because they saw what we were doing and they wanted to be involved. And then from there, we have reached out to some of the other special education units personally, asking if they wanted the program in their school and community.
And most recently, we were given the opportunity to speak at New South Wales Parliament House of Ministers for Correction and Youth Justice about the program, and they've directed us to some other areas and other schools that could really benefit from the program.
The expression "nothing succeeds like success" also applies here. If you pull off something small and it works well, then you get bigger as you go on, more people hear about it. And the teaching program, again, spread out as far as it is, we have a lot of contacts with a lot of schools. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering, especially since you guys do so much like disability accommodation on your team, how do you deal with clarifying boundaries, especially with students with disabilities to like other students on the teams, like making everybody on the team aware of like somebody's needs and everything?
We are very clear in our intake of rookies that there are students with disabilities and that they have different needs and communication is different. And with our sub-team leaders, when they're put into a group, their group of students is well versed knowing their communication difficulties, and they will also be told by mentors the students' communication difficulties. But unless a student tells us, we do not
as to the boundaries, we have a team contract with a very clear set of behavioural expectations. So, and when we do it, we start an intake around July, August, with the team being confirmed around November, December. So we have an extended period where the kids come and meet once a fortnight in the workshop for a Saturday, and they are put through tools, culture, the whole lot. And by the time we get to that, we have a pretty good idea of who can handle it and who can't, and so do they. So we probably retain about 40% of our intake each year as team members. I have never had to say to someone, you are not welcome, because they've figured it out for themselves that they're not ready yet. And we tell them, you're still a team member, you're just not ready to join yet, come back next year. So we've had a couple of kids that took like 3-4 years to be ready to do it, but they did. So yeah, there are difficulties in how we deal with it, but that's largely clear rules, time to get adjusted, and making sure the kids know what they need to work on. I think this might be our last one before someone comes and kicks us out.
So you guys obviously do a lot for outreach. What is the process that you guys use to kind of go about all this different outreach events and kind of prioritize what you're going to work on each year?
So, we have a very long, big spreadsheet. It's called our master spreadsheet. We love it. But we will always prioritize the programs that have been running longer. So our teaching program, Unlimited, Unstoppable, they always get priority over anything new. But when we are looking at a new program, it first goes through our mentors, where they'll have like a mentor meeting and discuss whether it fits with our team morals, whether we can do it physically, and then it will go to our executive committee, who will decide whether they're interested in doing it, and then finally it will go to the rest of our team, who will basically just get, this is the information, this is the volunteers, who's doing it.
I mentioned before, there's the volunteering in lieu of team fees. So a bunch of kids that can't do Robotics, for example, will do those activities instead.
Or for the ones who can't teach at all, they just struggle in that situation, we give them options like helping set up for the event, and that's their volunteer, and they do all the setup and the equipment maintenance and things like that.
Cool. So I think that door opening means it's a secret signal that we're going to get out.
If any of you would like to ask us questions further, we're happy to hang around or sit out in the hallway. Now, if you want to look up the team website and would like some help in getting any of these programs started, please contact us. We're really, really happy to help. Andrew up the back, I said Unified Robotics is a really simple way to get started, and it makes a huge difference. So thanks for coming, guys, and we'll see you around.